Welcome to Here You Go. Here You Go is a project I started in order to present media that has been created or enhanced with AI. The project is primarily for my own entertainment and experimentation, but feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy it too. And now for the presentation. Derelicts of Uranus, by J Harvey Haggard, is a science fiction novel written in the early 20th century. The story unfolds on the tumultuous and muddy planet Uranus, where the protagonist, Lonny Higgens, navigates his existence as a mudfisher amidst perilous conditions and quirky alien life forms. This adventurous tale explores themes of survival, competition, and the effects of a strange environment on human behavior. The narrative follows Lonny as he grapples with his feelings of boredom and lethargy in the harsh, muddy landscape of Uranus. Part 1.
Derelicts of Uranus by J Harvey Haggard. Here is adventure and danger. Mudfishers, and a girl, and a quasi-human, looking for trouble. Chapter 1. Lonny Higgens, once of the earthly planet, stretched out in the conning tower of his mud submarine. An aquatic monstrosity of globular reinforced steel that was at home either above or below the surface of the squirming mud seas of Uranus, and sighed lazily. "Blast it!" he moaned sleepily and almost regretfully. "There's something about this planet that makes you have spring fever the year round, and it gets worse and worse. Lonny Higgens, you're a lazy, no good fool, and you'll never get around to the things you used to dream about." The circular hatch was open over his head, showing a patch of black, swirling mists through which dark midges maneuvered in tiny swarms. Just as he was dozing comfortably, forgetful of the humming insects on the outside and the occasional flopping sounds made by things that squirmed in the muddy ocean, something dropped from the mist, falling plunk on his forehead. He jerked sidewise, just as another pellet of bald mud struck him on the end of his nose. He glimpsed a tiny visage, half insect and quasi-human, peering over the hatch rim for an instant. "Baron Munchie!" exclaimed Lonny irritably, recognizing this curious specimen of Uranisian life. "Cut that out, or I'll wring your little neck. I haven't got time for any of your monkey shines." A winged thing soared down from the mists, landing on the chair beside his couch, and Baron Munchie, like a dragonfly come to mysterious human-like life, folded his transparent wings back like a cloak and paced back and forth. "Me mad. Me plent mad," rasped Baron Munchie, who produced his tones by a vibration of his wings. "Ah, beat it," snorted Lonny, turning his head away. The small being had brought with him the dank, stagnant aroma of the outer swamps, and that reminded him of untended net lines hanging in the mud. He was bored with Baron Munchie and his endless lying and conniving. When he had first come to Uranus, 2 years before, the little rascal had showed up on the landing deck, more dead than alive from a terrific beating at the hands of several of his fellows. Baron Munchie was a born fighter. He survived under the ministrations of the lonely terrestrial and had become attached to the mud submarine. But he dearly loved to stir up trouble, and nothing pleased the little demon more than to shout insults at mud monkeys until they fought among themselves. "Go away. I'm tired of listening to your silly chatter." "Me mad as heck," cried Baron Munchie, sitting down on the edge of the chair like a tiny mannequin and doubling his tiny fists beneath his chitinous chin. "That man say the boss no good. He say the boss one big blonde devil. He say—" "Shut up," protested Lonny. "Rayburn's all right. He's just a mud fisher like me, and has got to get along. It's natural that he doesn't like a rival, and I'm not a bit riled by your chatter." He was presently snoring, and Baron Munchie looked across the space through squinting, calculating eyes. For a moment, the mischievous glitter in his faceted eyes became dulled, and then he soared across the bed and sat astride Lonny's neck, using the Adam's apple for a saddle. Lonny roused with a start and gulped. The small, insect-like visage was thrust grimly down to the end of his nose, and a tiny finger was raised emphatically. "He say he knock the holy feather from you, boss," he chirped grimly. "He say you fish for pearls in mud that belong him. He say that girl make him one fine cook, and—" "Huh?" demanded Lonny Higgens. "What girl?" "Oh, he probably means Lana." "Blast it, Munchie, can't you let a guy sleep?" If she wants to fall for a flat tire like Rayburn, it's no business of mine. Grunting reluctantly, Lonny got up and stretched, cursing in a fervent undertone, at which Baron Munchie looked hopeful. Good Lord, Munchie, he growled. Why I ever put up with you, and your stirring up trouble is more than I know. Yet he knew that the little creature's chatter had helped to break the deadly monotony of the long winter hours in which he had managed to teach pidgin English to the Uranisian. He climbed up the ladder, through the hatch, just as a rocking movement was apparent in the hull of the mud submarine. Down past the oblong landing he saw great circular movements in the mud, where his nets had been a few moments before. Tiny midges were falling into the mud and being drawn into the gyrating vortices. Now thoroughly awake, he leaped down and across the landing. In a few seconds he stood cursing at the broken strands of the anchor lines where his nets had been ripped away. Damn you whirl rays, he cursed, shaking his fist in the direction of the whirlpools that surged in and out like living things, which of course they were, under their coating of slimy mud. The whirl rays had a way of forcing a stream of mud in a downward spout and creating a resultant whirlpool which sucked everything into its voracious clutches. That's my 10th set of nets you've got that way. Baron Munchie fluttered out from below and landed on the railing, preening his wings. There was an I-told-you-so expression on his insectivorian countenance when he saw the angry expression on the terrestrial's face and heard the flow of vitriolic words. He hopped up and down with impish ecstasy. My goodness, boss, he chirruped. You heap mad. Maybe something goin' happen now, huh? Maybe you whipped her out of Rayburn, huh? Lonny swatted at Baron Munchie with his open palm, but the blow never landed. Out of the mists, coming suddenly from somewhere across the squirming quagmire, came the sounds of a human being crying in desperation. Help! Help! Sounded the voice. And the thing that so startled Lonny Higgens was that the words were unmistakably feminine. Good Lord, he exploded. Do you suppose Rayburn really has got Lana in his mud submarine? Damn it, Baron Munchie, why didn't you say so before you spoke? Chapter 2. Contrary to the general belief earlier than 2070, when the explorer Ramundsen first dipped down through the screening vapors of Uranus, the temperature never approached the freezing point and lurked instead nearer to the boiling mark of water. The boiling point on Uranus varied greatly, however, due to unbelievable fluctuations of the atmospheric pressure. Lonny made poor time, slogging along on the mud shoes fashioned with tough vines over a framework of metal. There was a limit to the speed you could make on such contraptions. Baron Munchie, bordering on a nervous frenzy at the promise of activity, had darted ahead, his filmy wings dissolving quickly in the swirling mist. He had a good general idea as to the whereabouts of Rayburn's mud submarine. Likewise, he had a fairly good estimate of the mud fisher's capabilities and did not think that Lana Hilton would suffer much if Rayburn had not gone completely wacky. At times the going was pretty good, where the mud was entwined with thick layers of lightning kelp so-called because tiny sparkles of static electricity darted from it at each step of his clogged mud shoes. Mud, mud, mud. All Uranus was one vast ball of squirming mud, 32,000 miles through of squashy mud, stuff that would run through his fingers and through the webs of his shoes, and which would suck greedily at his body if he so much as lost his footing. Mud that would never solidify due to the varying turmoil of barometric pressure. Mud that could never dry completely due to the quasi-soluble consistency of Uranisian silt. 2 years he'd been here now, fishing for the precious mollusks whose pearls might win him the security and prosperity he had never been able to wrest from the overpopulated Earth. 2 years it had been, or 9 days, as time was reckoned on Uranus. 9 times he had gone around the muddy world, keeping up with daylight such as it was, and now blast it the world was getting him, absorbing him mentally as well as physically, or so it seemed. Only 4 days before Uranisian, a bit less than a year, the feminine aridity of the planet had been shattered by the coming of that headstrong, unreasoning female, Lana Hilton. Prior to that, there had been company of a sort on Uranus. Link Rayburn's mud submarine had often drifted near enough for an occasional chat. But Lana's coming had made a crowd on Uranus, if 3 can be called a crowd, and Lonny was beginning to wish for the unbroken isolation of other planets with no form of life whatsoever. There was only one method of obtaining Uranisian pearls. That method was relatively simple. You had to invest every cent of your savings or heritage, as he had done 2 years before, and you had to pay towing charges to some space schooner that was coming near Uranus. Seafood came cheaply on Uranus, but clothing was a different problem, and you had to have a goodly stock of that. Then, when you did find enough pearls to warrant the voyage home, you had to send out an SOS to a nearby space vessel, and the captain, fearing the loss of his command if he disobeyed interplanetary law, would have to come several million miles extra to pick you up, sans submarine, of course, which by that time would be a rusted chunk of worthless metal anyway. He was wet to the skin when he heard voices through the mist. To his nose came the suffocating downdraft of the fishing vessel, mingled with the faint aroma of ammonia. "Sock him! Smack him down!" he heard Baron Munchie shouting at the top of his tiny voice. "Plaster or another. Lead with right, dad blame." Fearing the worst, Lonny tried to hurry, with the result that he became tangled in his mud shoes and had to flounder the rest of the way. On the landing, he shook off as much of the mud as was possible, kicked off his mud shoes and staggered toward the shaft of light boring up. In the center of the control room, Baron Munchie was stalking back and forth, yelling like a referee. Link Rayburn's angular body was sprawled back disgustedly on a low bench, while Lana Hilton was flopped down in a chair at a table, her dejected face propped up by both hands. "Why don't you wallop and kiss her?" demanded Baron Munchie, hopping up to the table beside her and trying to lift an arm. "Smash him over place, Lana." "Damn that mosquito," snapped Link Rayburn wearily. "Can't you swat him? Why doesn't that fool Lonny keep him home where he belongs?" "What's the big idea?" demanded Lonny, looking from one to the other and clawing miserably at his mud coating. He gazed accusingly at the girl in tattered metal-lined slacks and faded blouse of vitricine. "So you finally got here," she commented casually. "I thought that would bring you. He's chivalrous, isn't he, Link?" "Look here, Rayburn," snorted Lonny, doubling a grimy fist and turning to the flint-featured man. "Are you trying to play some sort of a game?" "Ask Lana," said Rayburn, puffing at a smoking stem of mud kelp. "She was the one that screamed." "Maybe it's me that's nuts," exploded Lonny indignantly. "Right," chorused the twain boredly. "Sock and boss," wailed Baron Munchie, shadow boxing on the border of the table. "Don't let him get away with that. Splatter him." "Ah, sit down," growled Link Rayburn, plucking thoughtfully at the delicate outline of a tiny mustache. Lana yelled all right. That was her way of calling the meeting to order. "The three of us constitute the majority on Uranus. And in case you're getting ideas, her virtue's safe. She's got quite a problem on her hands. Tell him, Lana." "You seem to be doing all right," said the girl, crossing her legs nonchalantly. "Well, to put it shortly, her mud submarine, which was a second-hand job, finally caved in from oxidation. So she came around here and demanded that I put her up with room and board for half of her take." "Look here," demanded Lana Hilton, taking a chamois bag from her bosom, which when opened, displayed a goodly fortune of pink Uranisian pearls. "My shack begins to crumble. Any minute it'll be heading down to the muddy locker, and that dirty robber wants them all for my keep. Everything I got, I tell you." "Nuts. The gal's buggy," said Link Rayburn coldly. "She's safe enough, I tell you. And if she weren't, there's not a blasted thing you could do about it. This planet has got her brain whirling. I told her she'd better sound out an SOS and take a powder for Earth." "What do you expect from me?" exploded Lonny. "I told you I would have nothing to do with that Nova skirt from the first, when she tried to play us one against the other." "I give up," cried Lana Hilton, spreading empty hands in a gesture of defeat. "Once I had the lead role in a chorus, and I gave all that up for this. I thought I could handle men with kid gloves, but when it comes to you, Lonny, I'll say you've cast iron defense." "Rayburn can have you," snorted Lonny, "for all I care." Spat. Her open hand had snapped out and landed on his cheek. "Swat, boss," pleaded Baron Munchie delightedly. Does that dame have a punch?" "Maybe I exaggerated, a trifle," stammered Lonny, taken aback by the startling reaction. "That's better," returned Lana Hilton, beginning to pace the control room worriedly. Lonny Higgens wiped a gob of mud thoughtfully from his chin and grinned when he saw that her hand was grimy. "Oh, hell," he said grudgingly. "I'll have to get back before this mud cakes up on me." "So long," said Link Rayburn, without looking around. "Come on, Munchie," called Lonny. "No fireworks." "No fireworks?" repeated Baron Munchie dolefully. "None at all. Lana, I'm still a white man, though it's much against my will. If worse comes to the worst, you can have an extra room in my mud-swimming hovel. And you can keep your handful of marbles." The girl whirled around, wide-eyed with surprise. A sunburst of hope and relief spread slowly over her features. "So you are human, after all," she gasped. "I'll just take you up on that before you change your mind. But in order not to have a misunderstanding, I'll let it be known that I'm going to pay half my pearls, whether you like it or not. Don't stand there grinning like an ape. You act as though I ought to throw in a kiss for good measure." "Go ahead," snorted Link Rayburn smirkingly. "Right on that muddy kisser." Climbing back into the upper mists, Lonny almost regretted his decision. She had donned a slicker suit and a pair of mud shoes and was ready to go. The mist swirlers were tumbling about as though alive, and Lonny had never felt so uncomfortable in his whole life. Chapter 3. He had to admit that Lana Hilton was adept on her mud shoes, but she was short of wind and soon began to lag. I would get stuck with a woman, he thought bitterly, not realizing that he spoke out loud. She didn't know what she was talking about, he decided, but for the sake of not starting an argument, he kept that to himself. In the meanwhile, he slowed his pace to match her own and said nothing. Tiny sparks of miniature lightning shot up from matted mud kelp and rippled along the supple curvature of her body. She was just good-looking enough to be a constant cause for trouble among the more populated centers of interplanetary civilization, a regular jinx for a fellow who wanted to get along with the least effort possible. He led the way along the thicker clumps of vegetation, choosing the firmer directions for her faltering steps, and for long moments he heard nothing but their own heavy breathings and the sounds of their feet slogging. A whirl ray came out of the mire, sending its tiny maelstrom careening away at a tangent and leaving a phosphorescent wake. He saw the girl shudder and avert her eyes. Lonny's own hand had slipped quickly inside his slicker to clutch the holster of a Z-type ray gun. "Back at home," she said thoughtfully, "the suckers all thought Uranus was something of a paradise, something like the South Seas. And I fell for that stuff." "Yeah," agreed Lonny grimly. "And after you got here, you were too thick-headed to give up the thing as a bad job, too afraid to face your friends with failure. So you punish yourself with your own temper." "I suppose that's advice from one who knows," she retorted sarcastically, pausing to rub the cramped muscles of her leg, then going on as he looked back. "Don't think I'm crazy if—" "Now what's the matter?" demanded Lonny irritably, pausing to see that she was stopped, and was clutching desperately at her throat, pulling at her collar. "Air, I can't get air," she gasped. "How about you?" Almost instantly, breathing was becoming difficult for Lonny. He peered around with dismay and saw that the mist was rising dangerously and that visibility was much stronger. Out of the distance came a faint, eerie whisper, as of distant winds dying. "Lana, it looks like we're in for it," he said grimly. "That's high pressure you feel. Pretty soon your ears will begin to ring. And if we don't hurry, we may never get back to boast about things here to our sappy friends at home." When the heavy pressure areas came over Uranus, mists rose high in the air and dispersed slowly. Swift expansion of atmospheric gases caused a tremendous surface pressure that would last for some time. It meant a quick crushing death under air compression if they didn't reach the mud submarine. Lana Hilton was white with fright and trying hard not to show it. A strange metamorphosis was taking place in the heavens. Lancing colors of orange and red shot up like gigantic swords to flash across the sky. His ears began to throb dully. As the mist rose, Lonny saw that they had come too far to the left, and that the mud ship was 100 yards directly to their right. He saw something else, too. A man was running across the muddy surface if his fast wobbling progress on mud shoes could have been described as a run. It could be only one person, Link Rayburn. A terrible fear seized him. If Rayburn reached the mud ship and shut them out, they would die horribly. He began to hurry forward, slipped, and fell awkwardly. Lana made a wry face and helped him to his feet. "The rat," she gasped. He heard you refer to my bag of pearls as a mere handful. It wouldn't do you any harm to think once in a while before speaking, big boy. Handful, of course, her small collection was a handful compared to his own rich pickings. So that was why she had come with him. The world was going around in a whirl now, but Lonny kept staggering onward. Link Rayburn had disappeared. The mud submarine kept dancing tauntingly before his eyes and then disappearing. If it sank before he reached it, the work of long, endless months would slip from his grasp, and with it would go his life. Back on Earth, they would never know, and Rayburn would live a life of affluence and ease. We've got to make it, Lana, he gritted, though every breath was a torment that sent hot flames of pain shooting through every cell. She turned a game, tortured face to his, and nodded vehemently. A whole school of whirl rays came rippling toward them, crisscrossing the mud with gleaming trails, and Lonny found his Z-ray weapon, sent the purplish beams of annihilation down into the centers of quivering, living whirlpools. Once he went around and around in narrowing circles toward the opened maw of a whirl ray, only to see the lower shape dematerialize before the deadly emanation. They were at the very edge of the submarine, were clambering across the muddy landing, using their last reserve of strength. Link Rayburn was working at the catches of the hatch cover, and had just succeeded in undoing the fastenings. Now he gave a tremendous heave, and the thing fell like a trapdoor. Hurled on by his wrath, Lonny made a dive for the traitorous visage, but as he dove his foot slipped and he skidded sidewise. His head came down upon a railing brace with a sickening impact, and the gun went spinning. Through the darkening chaos of his mind, he felt the submarine starting to submerge. The mud was creeping up toward his body, was sucking at Lana's ankles, crawling in a tiny avalanche toward the dome of the hatch cover now closed. They were beaten, whipped, done for. Now Rayburn could go back to Earth concocting some wild tale as to their death. He would be laughing at them and enjoying every luxury. Lana was either dead game or so angry at Link's betrayal that she refused to give up. Though her face was distorted terribly from heavy pressure and agony, she pressed onward, was crumbling at last to her knees and pointing wildly. Lonny saw what she meant. He could have shouted for joy, but breath would not come from his compressed lungs. The gun had fallen upon the lip of the hatch cowling, and now the cover was jammed. Through a narrow slit he saw Rayburn's eyes narrowed and bestial, and his hands, working like mad to free the mechanism. If he went down that way, it meant death for him too. Under heavy pressure, the mud would send terrible pseudopods grasping through the slit. Lonny could have laughed, but there was no time for gloating. He saw the hatch door come up again, and then his foot had settled over the gun, and he was helping Lana down the stairway. "Tough luck, Link," he whispered huskily, as weakness overcame him and he tumbled down the stairs. Dimly he became aware that the hatch lid was down securely now, and that the submarine was sinking rapidly. Lana Hilton clung to the upper ladderway for a moment, then released her hold from paralyzed fingers and fell like a rag doll, bouncing down the steps to come to rest across his own body. A trickle of blood came from her mouth, but she was grinning. That was all Lonny knew, for the darkness came up to swallow everything. Chapter 4. Who hit him, boss? Boss hit him heap hard. Baron Munchie, hardly able to lift the damp towel, was dragging it across his mouth, smothering him. Link Rayburn watched the operation interestedly, but not cautiously, from his position before the instrument panel. Lana Hilton was sitting up dazedly, rearranging her hair. "I knew it was too much to expect," she commented. "Couldn't leave us alone, could you, Link? I was just beginning to like the idea of getting away from you for good." "Oh, my head. I hope our friend had the foresight to stock his larder well," said Link Rayburn with a shrug. "We may be cooped up here for some time." Lonny sat up, shaking his head dazedly. "I ought to whale the tar out of you," he cried angrily. "But I've got more sense than to do it at a time like this. Maybe I'll do it when the subboat comes up to the surface again. I never did have too much faith in you, Rayburn." Link Rayburn laughed. "You won't do it then, or ever, Lonny. There isn't an ounce of fight left in you. The planet's got you. I've always believed that you had enough pearls stacked away to make a fortune on Earth, but you kept putting the time for departure off into the future." His taunts acted as harsh irritants to Lonny Higgens, who doubled his fists and took a couple of steps forward. Slap him down, boss, urged Baron Munchie, and Lonny stopped, his shoulders falling. That's right, he said, grinning at the little elf. Fight to the death, like all these insensate creatures of Uranus. No, I'll not do it. I'm saving myself, against the day I'll get back to Earth. You're a fool, said Link Rayburn. Next time I'll get you for keeps. At least you can save it until we get up from here, returned Lonny, brushing past the other and examining the instruments. Depth indication now 4,000 feet, and sinking slowly. With luck, they would be on the surface again in a few hours. Then he would either knock the tar out of Link Rayburn or kick him out in the mud. He felt a deep-seated, lethargic contempt for the mud fisher. The dapper man was a despicable murderer at heart, and now he felt only a distant sort of loathing for him. Lana was different. In a way, she might have been a good sort. He had a hunch that Uranus was affecting her much as it had him, bringing forth his irritable nature, sapping his energy, dulling his sensations in a sluggish, remote way. He had an idea that she would cut an amazingly attractive figure in one of the late translucent evening gowns, back in one of the live spots of the populated planets. At the moment, she was highly intolerable and self-centered. He would do well to be rid of both of them. Baron Munchie was soaring up and down the room, catching midges, when Lonny descended to the lower decks. The atomic motors, he found, were in good condition for an emergency.